Well, welcome to Mornings with Michele. I'm Michele Foster, and so delighted you're here today because today we are interviewing a fabulous friend, mentor, businesswoman, mom, and wife. Jody Barbour is just exceptional, and you can figure that out for yourself. But I want to just give her a quick introduction and then let her take the stage. So, Jody is an enthusiastic advocate for women entrepreneurs. After 16 plus years in vocational ministry, Jody entered the entrepreneurial space and now has a passion to help other women take their lives back financially while shedding unhealthy money mindsets. She cares about helping women discover and step into their purpose unapologetically. So here we go. Welcome, Jody.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Jody, I've had the privilege of working alongside you in a mastermind that we met in. And I just love you. And so I would love to go back because I don't know the little Jody. And I would love to explore how you became this powerhouse of a woman. So if you would, go back to when you were a little girl, 5 years old. And what were your dreams? What did you dream about when you grew up?
Well, I actually had a lot of dreams that, I from childhood, some of them I do feel like have actually manifested themselves in my life. But I just wanted to be around people. I've always been an advocate for people. And so a lot of my childhood, my parents used to say, like, when you would put me in a room, everybody would be my best friend by the end of the time that we were there. It's like, give me a room of strangers. I will get to know. And I was like that from a young age. I mean, I would just go up and talk to anybody. I would talk to any stranger. And so as I kind of grew up, people would always ask the question, like, what are your hobbies? What are your interests? What do you like to do? And although I did have different things that I was interested in, like music and, there were different hobbies that I pursued. I used to always think people are my hobby. So
I love it.
I always knew I wanted to work with people in some capacity. And also just really had a passion to travel the world, and to tell stories. And but yeah, from a young age, I've always just been super interested in people. I know that sounds weird, but
It doesn't at all. And for those of us that know you, it makes complete sense because from the minute I met you, I felt like you friended me. So that makes a lot of sense to those of us that know you. And for those of you that don't know her, you should get to know her. She's extraordinary. So how did you get supported by others when you were young? And even in today's world, how do you get supported by others?
yeah. Well, my parents have always been incredible. I mean, they're not perfect people, just like none of us are, but I feel like from a young age, they really helped my personality to flourish. I always felt their support. I always felt as though they saw me for how I was uniquely created. I've always been loud. I've always been pretty boisterous. I've been very opinionated. And I love to talk a lot, and I think where there were other adults in my life that would say, okay, you need to be quiet, or like, my parents were very careful to say, like, no, like, you express yourself. They always accepted my opinions and my thoughts about things within reason, as like being a child. And I feel like that support from them was probably one of the biggest foundations in my life. As I entered into adulthood, I had a tremendous amount of confidence in what I could and couldn't do. And even through heartbreak and disappointments and things that felt like failures, my parents have always been in my corner, number one cheerleaders. In current days too, and this is a little bit more of my story more currently, but I'm married to a pastor, And we have a long history in vocational ministry, not just in a church. We've also worked in college ministry. But one of the things about my husband, Bobby, that has been tremendous is he also, like my parents, has just seen me for who I am and has always wanted me to feel as though I was flourishing in my personality instead of trying to change it. And I think for women, that's really important because oftentimes as women, we apologize a lot. I think we try to bend our personalities or our preferences, our opinions to kind of fit whatever social context we're in. And my parents and my husband have been, my parents as a set of people, my husband have just really, they have helped me understand how I also want other women to feel as they are stepping into their purpose unapologetically with how they've been uniquely designed. So yeah, that's where most of my support has come from.
That's awesome. And you're very fortunate. I think anyone that feels support around people that are the closest to you, the gratefulness needs to pour out of their pores. But let me ask you this. Do people always have an opinion about you because you are so, as you describe it, loud?
Oh, yes. Yeah, and I think that has, for whoever's listening who's familiar with the Enneagram, I'm actually an Enneagram 8, wing 7. And the thing that's really unique about the Enneagram 8, and I do think that women who are Enneagram 8s are often misunderstood because they can come across as bossy or too opinionated. But the Enneagram 8 is actually the most tender-hearted of all the personality types. And we are advocates at our core. And I think that is one of the things where when I have experienced resistance to my opinions, or when people have had thoughts or judgments about the different ways that I have chosen to shape my life or have chosen to make money or the things that I'm passionate about, I have really seen myself as someone who is like, you know what, I can take this and I am going to, in a sense, fall on my sword because I want to be an example to other women that they have permission to go after the things that they are passionate about and that they are dreaming about without having to explain or apologize or make other people understand what, or even agree with their decisions. So I've really seen myself, especially the past couple of years, as stepping into more of an advocacy role for women who really want to go after their big, huge, audacious dreams and showing them, if I can do this, you can too. You have permission to do this.
So what do you believe? I mean, Jody, we all have one absolute strength that just pops out of your head. What is it? What's your number one?
That I believe.
Wow. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I believe that each, in my audience, the people that I speak to the most, that I have a message for the most, are women, specifically in the entrepreneurial space. But I believe that every woman has a very unique gift that she can contribute to the world beyond motherhood, beyond, like all the traditional roles that we kind of see women in. I believe that women have a very unique contribution. And oftentimes, because of what culture has told them or what their story has told them from childhood, don't feel the freedom to really fully step into that. And I think that it has to be activated. And so one of the roles that I see myself stepping into, continuing to step into, is helping women really become activated in how they've been uniquely designed so that they can serve other people at the highest level from their giftings, from how they've been uniquely created. So
you believe that for your personal life, for your personal journey, Jody singularly, do you believe that is your biggest strength for yourself?
Yeah, 100%.
That's awesome. So you take that passion and you take it and you pay it forward. I really think that's beautiful and I respect it a lot.
Oh, thank you.
So we all have a big, hairy, audacious goal. What's yours?
Oh, yes. Well, for me, my big, hairy, audacious goal is to make a crap ton of money, not for the purpose of status, although owning beautiful things and having crazy financial freedom is a beautiful thing. I think for me, it's more showing my children that I can do it, and also giving other women who feel stuck permission to also go after these big goals. One of the things that I have really come to realize is that women in particular have really weird feelings and thoughts and judgments around money, specifically wealth, specifically around women making money and women pursuing wealth. This is something I have come across over and over and over again. In this particular area, I've also received a ton of resistance as I have gone after building businesses and pursuing wealth. And I want to do it myself, to show my children, but also to show women who are watching me that this is okay. Like, you don't have to sell your soul to, money isn't the root of all evil. Money is not bad. It is neutral. It is a tool that can be used to create impact in this world. And I just think there's a lot of stigma that has to be broken. And so for me, it's making a crap ton of money to then show women how to do it, to help break the stigma around it, so that there's not this weird guilt around wanting to make money and then actually going out and doing it.
Let me ask you this. I'm going to go deep here because you know me, that's what I do.
Yeah.
So, because I really believe that when we really get vulnerable is when we really teach. So was there a time in your life that you were broke or you were rich, like the opposite ends of the stick?
Yes. Well, so I mentioned that, my husband and I have been in vocational ministry for a long time. That's actually how we met. So we were both, before we were married, we were both in ministry as individuals. And then, and I think that there was a lot of unhealthy mindset around money that was really implanted at that time. There's a lot more to this story, but we lived.
Why do you think that? No, I want to hear this. Why do you think it was implanted? I mean, implanted means you planted it. It wasn't there. It was planted.
Totally. Yeah. I think a lot, my faith is very important to me. And being part of a community of other people from the same faith is very important to me. But I do think that we have had a lot of really damaging teaching that has been done around money. And the ministry that my husband and I were a part of, there was a cap to what we were able to make. And we were also prevented from making additional streams of income outside of the money that we raised to support our lives. And I think
why? I mean, corporations do the exact same thing. Yeah. You sign a document, there's a cap to your ceiling, and they will not let you work for anyone else. I mean, you sign an agreement. Is it just that simple? You signed an agreement?
Yeah. If you were going to work full-time for this organization, and we were also responsible for raising our own support. So we were dependent on other people and their generosity, and they're really seeing us as people in ministry worth investing in. So there was a lot of, I think that it was always presented to us in a lot of spiritual language, like, well, this is a beautiful thing. Like, other people need to give and be generous. And this is God's design for, how you go out on the mission field and serve. And while there are some of those things that I do agree with, I think that what it did for us was it really put us in this place of scarcity. And I, at one point in my life, was having the very real fear. I would wake up at 3:00 in the morning. Our kids were all really little. And I would imagine us not having food to feed our kids. So,
Wow.
and if I had thought about it logically, it's like, well, no, we have support, we have family, we have people that no one is going to let the Barbour family starve. But that was a real felt fear that I had that was affecting how I was interacting in the world. Well, when you have a fear like that that's so deeply embedded, you start to act differently around people. Then the people who are giving us support, it's like, well, we need to keep them happy. We need to make sure that they don't discontinue their support, because if they discontinue their support, our paycheck is going to be short. If we have a short paycheck, I won't have as much money to buy groceries. Therefore, I won't be able to feed my kids. That's what my brain, like the drama in my brain was telling me. And when you do that for years upon years upon years, it really, that's a lot to undo. It's not something that you just snap your fingers and can undo those mindsets overnight. So when we left that ministry and actually, ironically, walked into church ministry, I was freed up to go pursue whatever entrepreneurial endeavors I wanted. And I remember physically feeling like a burden was lifted off my shoulders, because I suddenly had the freedom to go create my own financial future. And that's why I'm so passionate about entrepreneurship. It's not just about the freedom of not having a boss or not being tied into a 9 to 5 or restricted to only so many weeks of vacation. For me, it was a mental freedom, knowing that I'm in charge. Like, I can go out and make money. I can go out and pursue this, and I don't have to explain it to anybody. I'm not dependent on other people, suddenly feeling generous and wanting to give. And I'm not disparaging ministries where their staff need to raise support. I think for me, this was very personal, and this was my own obstacle in my mind that I had to overcome. And but for other people, they flourish in that environment. So more power to you if that's an environment that you flourish in. For me personally, and for my family, it just felt like we were in bondage. So
I
I'm
think,
thankful.
Jody, if you take away the fact that it was part of a church, and if you just call it a job, right? So for some people, that is security that works. For other people, that is insecurity that doesn't work. So I think what you're saying is, this is your story. This is how, the bottom line, when I'm hearing from you, and what I'd like our listeners to hear is, this is what it made you feel. This is what now makes you feel. So, I would say to our listeners, how does what Jody's saying to you make you feel? She's talking really about both sides of the stick. Both are good.
Yeah.
One made Jody feel better than the other. Is that a fair comment?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Awesome.
And I just think that one of the things I've really learned is that, especially as we get older, and, now I'm raising children, and I'm like, oh, I want them to have a healthy mindset around money and around their dreams and around the visions that they have for their life. I don't want other people defining that for them. I want them to really feel the freedom to figure that out for themselves. But one of the things that I have really had to press into is having my own back, and really understanding if people in my life disagree, or if they don't understand, and if they're not willing to take time to understand, that's not mine to own. Like, I am the only thing that I actually need is for myself to have my own back, and for myself to love what I'm doing and love who I am. That's all I need. It's like, I don't need the approval of other people. I don't need the permission of other people. Fortunately, I have an extremely supportive partner, and I know not everybody has that, and I'm so grateful. But I'm also, we have run into a lot of pushback when people haven't understood how we're choosing to live our lives, how we're choosing to pursue financial freedom. And but that's okay, because all I need is to have my own back.
I love that. So let me ask you, so how do you manage failure? Give me an example.
Yes. Well, during the first few years of my husband transitioning into becoming a full-time vocational pastor, I actually had a business, an entrepreneurial business that I had started with. I'm with a network marketing company right now, but this was kind of my first go around with network marketing. And I remember seeing the potential and like, oh, I did not understand this vehicle at all. Now that I'm in it and now that I'm experiencing it, I'm seeing the potential, but I just couldn't grow it. And I think that I had a lot of people that were speaking into my life, like, we see you going so far with this. We see you doing this, that, and the other. And I just couldn't. And looking back, there are a lot of factors that played into that. I wasn't fully passionate about the company and their vision and the products that they were selling. I do think that is important. That is an important piece that has to be in place to really go all in to build a business. But I also felt like, well, if this person can do it, surely I can. And I just never could. And so during that time, I think what my brain was telling me was, well, you're just not cut out for this, or kind of buffering. It's like, okay, I wasn't able to make this work for whatever reason. And I just started buffering and thinking like, okay, well, I'm going to go back to teaching English online, or I'm going to go back to this, instead of just accepting it's okay that I failed. That doesn't mean that I don't have a future in this industry. That doesn't mean that I have some sort of missing skill set. And so as I started with my second network marketing company, I really had to coach myself through, no, you do have what it takes. You are no different than anybody else who has made it in this industry. It's just a matter of grit and consistency and time, and really working hard to rewrite the belief system that your brain has told you for all these years. So
let me ask you this, Jody, because you believe in the company you're with now. Would you be able to go back to the other company, and now that you've changed your mindset, would you be able to go back to that other company and be as successful?
I think so. I think knowing what I know now and knowing the mental work that it takes to pursue success, I think if I really if I put my mind to it, I absolutely could.
Even if you, like you said, didn't believe in the company, didn't believe in the products, or was that the differentiation between your new company and your old company?
Well, that was a big differentiation. I guess if I didn't have another option, I could go back. I could go back and actually make it work. I do think the vehicle is really, really, really important. But I think what I've learned more than anything is mindset is 90% of the work in this industry, especially in the entrepreneurial space. Our brains are so tricky, and they want to keep us safe and protected. And part of that safety and protection is not that we're running away from a tiger. It's that, we don't like the feeling of failure. We don't like the feeling of hard, or we don't like the feeling of having to persevere through things. So our brains are tricky and tell us, okay, avoid. If you feel like you're failing, then this must not be right, or this must not be good. And that's not always the case. I think we have to train our brains to be comfortable in thoughts of failure. And failure is just a thought. It's subjective. It's not something that, well, this is a failure and this is not. It's what our brains tell us about our circumstances.
It's so crazy because, if truly what you say, and I agree with you, that people are fearing failure, yet we're not defining that failure, and you're in an industry where you're dealing with the masses, that is a challenge that I'm sure you deal with every single day.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the unique things about our industry is the team, the community, the opportunities for mentorship and coaching and personal development. And I think the network marketing industry is a magnifier for what people already have going on in their hearts and in their minds. And I think it's a good thing. I think it's good for those things to be exposed. But it is crazy how quickly people will define failure. And it's like, but that's not, someone telling you no. That's not a failure. That's just life. That's business. And so I've been really proud of the women that I've gotten the privilege of working alongside, seeing them really do the hard work and identifying the stories that their brain is telling them, and then being able to challenge those stories. Like, no, maybe that isn't failure. This is just part of life and business. And this is all meant to grow me as a person, as a business owner, as someone who is taking ownership of my life and my decisions and having my own back. Failure is part of that. It's actually, failure can be beautiful.
Let me ask you, to our audience listening, the big message that I would love for you with you have a very diverse background. You've had a lot of support, but you sound like you deal with a world where you have to coach a lot of support into people, right? You've got to breathe success into people. So if there was one thing you would share with our listeners, what would that advice be from you, Jody?
Yeah, I think that I would just really challenge you to be able to differentiate between the voices in your life, or maybe the particular people in your life that are telling you that you are one way, but that's not actually true. And like I said before, even just having your own back, like being confident in your decisions, and not walking around always just second guessing yourself. If you have a dream, if you have this, in your gut that this is what you were designed for, go after it and put on blinders, and do not let anybody speak into that is not looking out for your best interest and that isn't willing to really understand who you are and where you're coming from. That would be my advice.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So whether it's business, family, self, spirituality, right?
Yeah.
Even just going to the grocery store and picking out things you want to buy. I think that's a beautiful message, right? So it's informed consent.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. And my husband and I, being a pastor and pastor's wife, we have gotten all, I think that there's something about those titles where culturally, at least the faith culture that we're in, people just feel permission to offer their thoughts and their opinions. And we always listen because we want to be approachable. We want to have an open door. But the thing that I've had to really guard myself against, and I think it's a good discipline for everyone, is you get to listen to other people's thoughts and opinions about your life, your decisions, and you get to either accept them or reject them. Just because someone speaks those words over you, or just because someone has that judgment or has that opinion, does not mean that that is actually true about you. And your job isn't to convince people otherwise. You cannot take ownership for other people's thoughts, opinions, judgments, or emotions. That's theirs to own. And so that, I think, as we're adults and maturing and, business owners, and really, if you're listening to Michele's podcast, then you care a lot about personal development and self-development. One of the best things you can do is to just have a really strong radar for what you're going to accept and what you're not going to accept. And that's why I'm so passionate about the unapologetic. Like, you do not have to apologize or explain who you are or how you've been designed. You just don't.
I want to ask you one question for our listeners. So what if someone's saying this to me, and I truly think and believe that I hear that, but believe this? And you have that moment where you're maybe unsure or open for change. How does that all work through in your brain, your brain? How do you like take it in, know who you are, but maybe I adjust, maybe I'm unapologetic, but I'm open. Like there's, there becomes a lot of chatter. Would you agree?
Yes. Oh, 100%. Yeah. And I will say, it's easy for me to share these things, but when I'm actually living them out in my life, it's not, it's challenging. So I'm not saying that this is something that isn't challenging. The past 3 months for me have actually been the most challenging in my entire adult life in this particular area. People speaking words over me that are not true, or making judgments about me or my life or my decisions that are not fair or accurate, and not being willing to really understand where I'm coming from. And I think one of the things, you have to have a safe inner circle. You can't navigate this life by yourself. You need to have people who see you for who you are, who are able to verbally affirm and speak words of truth over your life. You have to have that.
Let me ask you this. So they say there's a devil at the next level, right? So sometimes as you grow and that inner circle may be, and all I'm doing is being the devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
And because I think that, the chatter that can happen needs to be communicated so we all don't feel weird.
Yeah.
Right? I love not feeling weird. It's a comfortable place to feel. I don't want to be normal, but I certainly don't want to be weird. So when you get to a new growth spurt and mentally, and all of a sudden that inner circle changes a little, what do you do then?
Yeah.
Acknowledge it? Is it grief? Is it goodbye? Is it step backwards to make people comfortable? Like, what is it? Because it sounds like in the last 3 months, something's happened where you've grown and you're being challenged by the growth. Is that true?
Oh, 100%.
Okay.
Yes.
Talk about that.
Yeah. I think that, well, just with my own personal story of what's happened the past 3 months, I have had to grow really comfortable with relationships changing and blessing and releasing some relationships that maybe 2 years ago I would have thought would have lasted forever. And so, yeah, I think that relationships are not always meant to serve you for a lifetime. And it's not unkind or unhuman to release relationships when they are no longer healthy and no longer really truly serving either person. And so I do think that when you are going after goals and dreams, and when you are stepping into how you have been authentically designed to operate in this world, people have thoughts about that. And that's okay. They're allowed to have thoughts about that. That's totally fine. But I think that you just have to get super crystal clear about who you are and what you want. And the people that are meant to be in your life as a support system to encourage you and cheer you on, they will make themselves apparent. The people who weren't, they're going to make themselves apparent. And it doesn't have to be drama. It doesn't, it's not the end of the world. It's just, it's okay for two human beings to go their separate ways and to have complete respect for one another. So I do think
you just said that. When you have respect for that person, do you believe whether you ever deal with them again, so you were aligned and now you're misaligned?
Yes.
But can you still love them?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
I have one of the best pieces of advice I've gotten actually from a very dear friend who has been a faithful, supportive encourager through some of my darkest seasons, has been, she's really challenged me, when you have been hurt, or when you have when you are having to part ways with someone, or when there's just a breakdown, what does it look like to treat the other person with dignity? And that has really stuck with me. It's like treating someone with dignity doesn't mean managing their emotions. It doesn't mean making sure that they're okay all the time, or not exercising your boundaries or being healthy, but it does mean that you treat them as a human being, because they are. And every human being is, I believe, created in the image of God. And so there's an automatic requirement for giving other people dignity, but that does not equal aligning yourself with them. That does not equal continuing in your relationship. And that certainly does not equal agreeing with them. But there is a sense of, you are a human being created in the image of God. Because of that basis, I can treat you with respect and dignity. But I also, part of me treating you with respect and dignity is having firm boundaries, is knowing who I am, is not always agreeing with you.
Love it. I love it. And Jody, I think that when we go first, when we treat others with dignity and respect and love, we expect it back. And that makes what we're doing, does that make what we're doing? What was my question? Like, no longer chatter in my head? Is that what makes me able to go forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think that unfortunately, even though it is completely right to expect to be treated with dignity by other people, that's just not always what happens. And that's what always brings me back to having your own back. It's like, okay, if every person of meaning in my life were to turn their back on me and to say a bunch of untrue things about me and to like release their support of me, would I be okay? Yeah, you would. There would be grief. There would be having to move on. There would be having to reconcile that. But at the end of the day, you would be okay.
Also, a sense of freedom when you get that burden taken off your shoulders.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah, that was people pleasing and fearing the opinions of others, or even having like this, low-key obsession with what are other people thinking? What are they feeling about me? Working through that and finding freedom from that, I think, is one of the best life skills that a human being can pursue.
Well, based on what you said earlier, right? You, as a very young girl, you didn't have to experience scarcity because the people that were the closest to you didn't put that on you.
Yeah.
So when it got put on you, you woke up and said, whoa, whoa.
Yeah.
Right? And you were unapologetic because you already felt the feeling of no lack of scarcity.
Yes. Right.
So one last thing before this is awesome. Because there's a lot of people that haven't been as fortunate as you've been with the kind of support that you've had. Yes, you picked your husband, but you picked well, your parents, because you're aligned, right? Your parents and you are aligned. Well, not everybody has had that alignment. There are people listening to this podcast that have never experienced anything but scarcity.
Yeah.
So where do they start? Not experiencing scarcity.
Yeah. Well, first of all, if that is you and you're listening to this podcast, I'm so sorry that has been your experience, that you should not have been treated that way as a child. You should never be treated that way as a human being, period. I do think you probably have more strength in you than you even maybe feel or realize. I am a huge, huge advocate for therapy, and specifically therapy designed around dealing with childhood trauma. I am not a therapist, so this isn't advice coming from a place of, expertise, but I do think that I do have many, many, many years in vocational ministry, and I've worked with a lot of people that have come from a lot of childhood trauma. And the thing that I see holding people back, and that fight or flight, which is like, that's kind of the source of our scarcity mindset, is that fight or flight response that we have, is undealt with childhood trauma. And that always comes out. You can't ignore or push that down or pretend like it didn't happen. It's impossible. Like, your body remembers the trauma. And so although it may feel really uncomfortable and scary, I guess I do believe that in order for you to step into a life of abundance, you have to deal with that. You have to. And yeah, I actually have a lot of really good recommendations for different types of therapies, but again, I don't know if I'm overstepping my.
No, please, these are your recommendations. And I also want, because if I understood a conversation we had, your husband is stepping into business coaching. So yes. I want you to bridge that, because if you're in business and you're not feeling successful, and I don't care if it's, whatever type of business you've gone into, is it a belief that you and your husband, or your husband believes, that it still goes back to the way you were treated as a child?
Yeah, I mean, we would believe, and this is because of our experience in ministry, working with people. I mean, that ministry is people. That's
absolutely
what it is.
right.
And the blocks we see in people, whether it's success in business, success in relationships, success in them living into their full potential. I am a strong believer that if the childhood stuff is not dealt with, that is going to always be an obstacle that is going to prevent you from moving forward. So he would agree with me too. And, the brain is just a tricky thing. Again, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a therapist, but I have done a lot of study on the human psyche, and the brain is tricky, and the stories that have been hardwired into our consciousness from childhood absolutely affect us when we're adults. And I think that we can be very good at masking that or overcompensating in other areas. And I would even say, if you are someone who is really driven towards success, and like that's the only place that you find life, is the next achievement, the next goal. To me, that's also like, hey, a red flag, not in a condemning way, but just it's like, oh, I should probably pay attention. Maybe this is overcompensating for something that I haven't dealt with from my childhood. And success, goals, achievements, those are good things. Like, those are things that are worthy of being pursued, but not as a way to cover up what has happened in childhood. So, right. And yeah, unfortunately, I would say 85% of the people that we do life with, that we're in relationship with, that we minister to, that is the core issue.
Wow, that's big stuff. So Jody, how do people find you? Tell us a little about how, if somebody wants to connect with the amazing Jody, tell us how to do that.
Yes. Well, I'm really just getting started. You can find me on social media, Jody Good Living. It's Jody with a Y, Good Living. On Instagram, I'm on Facebook, Jody Barbour. It's Barbour. And then you can also find me on LinkedIn. We met through a LinkedIn mastermind, and so I've been kind of reactivating my activity on LinkedIn as well, Jody Barbour. And in terms of really connecting with me, I send out a weekly newsletter where I talk a lot about mindset. I talk a lot about holistic health. But keep me in your back pocket, because I have plans to, if you're a woman entrepreneur who really struggles with mindset and money mindset, my dream is, over the next couple of years, to actually open up a coaching business to really help women entrepreneurs deal with a lot of these obstacles that are holding them back from living out of their truest, most authentic self as they build their business. And often those two things are so aligned, like who you are, how you've been designed, and the type of business that you're trying to build are so interconnected. And you want to get those nasty obstacles out of the way. So
that's great, Jody. And I would say to you, you don't have the letters behind you, but you have the experience. And all I ever see in you is this just amazing heart that just resonates with that gorgeous smile. So, if anyone needs or wants, I mean, is there a way for them also to, well, they can get through with Instagram at Jody Good Living, and you can IG you or IM you. And so great. So Jody, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy, extraordinary day to spend time with myself and our listeners here, and just go be great. You are, and you are changing lives. So thank you so much, and have a super fantastic day.
Thanks, Michelle. Appreciate being here.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.